door into Sysco's virtual kitchen to see everything that's turning on my other phone here. Up and running, so we are here today. SVK, welcome Kevin.
It's good to be here.
Kevin's on my studio couch. You can see there.
I appreciate that you called it that, not something else.
Well, we have a great show lined up, everyone, that's going to be watching today's show. I'm going to turn the music down a little bit. We're going to keep the background with some of that white noise. But I do want to talk a little bit about a few things that we're going to be discussing today. So we're tackling food inflation on this whole month of January as best we can. All of our shows are really tied around on working with food inflation. I call it fighting food inflation, but maybe it should be like hanging out with food inflation or doing stuff with food inflation.
Addressing?
Addressing? Ooh. Address, that's a great, see, that's like couch. Makes you sound smart. So we're going to be talking about this, and I think it's good to know there's so many things to do that. We brought an industry expert, also the most coolest guy. You know, remember that commercial, like the most fascinating guy in the world?
Oh, yes.
He's the most coolest guy in food service. Yeah. We have Jim Taylor on the show today. We're going to talk with Jim a little bit around this. And then we're going to bring up the costing tool, inflation tool, Kev, that you've used quite a bit over your career with a lot of restaurants out there. And we're going to go through that. We're going to test it, play with it, do what we can to show you what else you can do out there opposed to just maybe blanking or not really knowing what to do with your pricing on your menu, but also what other things can you do in your business? And that's where this guy, the most coolest guy, maybe just call him the coolest guy in food service, Jim Taylor.
That's a good one. I'd be honored to have that title.
Cool. He's a really cool guy.
He is super cool. He's definitely one of the coolest guys in food service.
One of the smartest guys in our industry too.
Yes.
Yes.
And also calm.
He's not sitting on a couch. He's not on a couch though. Okay.
I'm just hoping he doesn't hang up when I'm like, didn't give him the actual coolest guy. I
think out of the 1,000 shows I've done, this is the first time I've done one with someone on a couch. It's awesome. Yeah. I am getting a studio with a couch.
If there's time, we can give the backstory on this, but let's.
Yes. We're going to break to a quick commercial, come back, then we're going to bring this cool expert guy as he giggles in the green room. And then we're going to dive right into food inflation. And we're going to talk about it. And then we're going to get into this tool out there to help you. So we'll be right back after this with the cool guy from the industry, the other cool guy on the couch. All right.
Imagine both your front and back of house teams are so well trained that they're executing flawlessly. Your front of house is doubling your sales, boosting repeat business, and creating 5-star dining experiences, while your back of house is consistently preparing each dish to perfection, on time and to spec. Having a restaurant this dialed takes a unique training system. That's where Serve comes in. Serve means Study Restaurant Variety, and it is a powerful, mobile training system, custom built to meet the needs of your restaurant. Serve will up-level your team's knowledge and skills, maximize your profits, and create experiences guests will rave about. Serve is the key to unlocking your restaurant's hidden potential, and will prove that the more your team is able to learn, the more your restaurant will earn. It's Serve, and it's a game changer. Ready to serve? Get started at servenow.com.
Hey, welcome everyone back to SVK Network. I think Kev, you fell asleep. I think I saw you nod off on the couch.
No, I'm communicating with the electricians here, so.
Okay. At least you're honest.
I was just trying to think of it in defense as to why I wouldn't necessarily vote Jim as like the most. And I thought to myself, I'm like, technically Bo Jackson is also, he's not only a 2-sport athlete, he's also in food service. So I just trying to.
Well, just wait. I have Robert Irvine.
Still good to be in that company,
in
Jim.
A few weeks.
Hey,
so we can go from one celebrity to another one. Right? Just gonna let's talk, Jim. We'll just banter back and forth.
Yeah, I'll take what I can get. Thanks for having me.
Who's had the coolest person on the show? Anyways, let's talk food inflation as our listeners and everyone else can be watching this on our many on-demand channels and on TikTok as I am on right now. So a couple things I want to talk about as a food inflation. So Jim, first of all, you're from Benchmark 60. You created Benchmark 60. It's one of the best leading companies out there, I think, helping restaurants in the industry across Canada and the United States, globally, probably, I think, too, right? And
Slick
so you're
website.
the expert. Expert. What? Did you say
Slick
cool website?
Yeah, no, it's solid. Like it's good. It's easy to navigate and find, and yeah.
Trying to keep it simple.
Doesn't just look good, is what I'm trying
Can
to
you
say.
at least lay down a little on the couch?
I feel like I should sit on the couch here too.
I
Jealous.
know. He's on a couch. Anyway, so thank you so much, Jim, for joining us today. And we're super stoked to always have you on the show. And also bring some guidance from the outside in to the way that you look at business, especially in our industry. So who wants to start with this big first question here? Who's going to answer this one? So give me an overview right now, Jim, maybe from your perspective on how food inflation right now is affecting our restaurant industry across Canada. What are you seeing out there?
It's a scramble, that's for sure. I think that, I think the food inflation ended 2022 at just under 9%, I think, right? 8.5% or something like that. And there isn't a restaurant that I talk to or an operator that I talk to that isn't mentioning inflation as number one or number two on their list of concerns. I mean, it's the top of the list, right? And I think they're all, in one way or another, they're all wondering, how to deal with it. And a lot of cases going straight back to what we've always done. And it's just look at pricing and look at try and find ways to run leaner kind of thing, right? It's a bit of a scramble right now, I think.
Do you, Kev, what do you see from your side before I ask Jim another question here? But Kev, what are you seeing right now working with the restaurants, customers out there? Are you seeing it from central Canada?
Are we seeing it being a challenge, or like?
Yeah, what are you seeing out there? What are you seeing from your perspective?
Absolutely, and I'm Middle Prairies. We're in Manitoba, and compounding that. Sorry, compounding is the wrong word. But they've got minimum wage. They're dealing with a minimum wage increase as well, right? And regardless of what your stance is on that, it is another thing. It's just another thing at the moment. I think that people have to deal with everything going on, and then not only that, like this is a time of year that is typically a bit more challenging in the industry, where things, again, I don't want to use words and get held to, but typically there's a little bit of a slowdown after Christmas, and
we know that.
Yep, some would argue that the bills from Christmas time start showing up, and I mean I think this time of year is a challenge enough without all of that. But yeah, we're facing it in the middle of Canada, I think, just like anywhere else.
Now, the thing that I saw and I read the other day, that last year, so we just came into 2022, was like a banner year for us. Sales were up. We actually were seeing a surpass pre-pandemic numbers of what we saw. Jim, do you feel that we're going to hit this year?
Well,
that's a heavy one, eh?
It's a heavy one, but I try to compartmentalize things a lot and really make sure that we understand what's happening in lots of different ways. And there's so many restaurants right now that are seeing these record revenue numbers, right? But they're not seeing record profit. They're not seeing record customer count. They're not seeing, there's lots of different
check average. Sorry, Jim, just want to jump in. There's check averages coming down.
A lot of scenarios we're seeing right now are seeing decreased customer count.
Okay.
And check averages in a lot of cases for the year were still up, but in the last quarter, a lot of them we're starting to see dropping.
Really?
But the record revenue in so many scenarios was based on customer count not necessarily being up, but menu prices. You talk to most operators, they increased their prices 2, 3, 4 times last year.
So that was like an inflation number then. We were banking some inflation there.
Yeah.
Right? Kev, what do you think that we're going to see in 2023 as we navigate? We're going to have a banner year again? What do you think?
Well, I want to optimistically say yeah, but I really like what Jim said about compartmentalizing. I think there's, I've been at Sysco now 17 years, and I can't think, at least to me, I can't think of a time where you looking at all the different segments, right? Like of business, and how, I think there's so many different nuances, and I don't want to take anything, get anything out early that Jim's going to talk about coming up, but talking about lease costs necessarily talk about as much in the past, but even like people looking at leases, the size of their space, the like I mean, and for years in business resources, we've been bringing this to people's attention, right? But I don't feel like there's ever been more of an appetite for people, you know, to look at all of these costs. And so, yeah, like for sure, I think that people that are looking at what's the term I want to use, like just that are open to like leaving no door closed, right? Looking at all parts of the business, all aspects, I think are going to have a good year. That's my somewhat politically correct response.
Yeah, I would agree.
Jim, what's your take on that? I agree with Kevin. What do you think? Is that something that?
Well, some of it, you know, we're still obviously really early in the year, and so some of it is gut feeling a little bit, right? But you know, typically, in terms of how my day-to-day goes, I've never had a year that there's been so much interest and discussion in looking at things differently. You know, typically it's kind of this January's like hunker down and save money and, you know, work some service or kitchen shifts yourself as an owner or an operator to try to save on, you know, that little bit of a slower time of year. And this year we're seeing it to be totally different. It's people thinking, if I don't do this now, I'm going to be playing catch up for the rest of the year. And we need to look at things differently. And, you know, exactly what Kevin was saying, it is different. I think the restaurant operators that look at things really differently and, you know, not to use the term too many times, but compartmentalize things, there's still opportunity to have a really good year. So
one of the other so I want to go on from that. I want to ask you another question here before we get into this calculator. One of the things let's talk about difference. One of the things that we just recently read, that 1 out of 3 restaurants in Canada right now are gravitating towards less quality ingredients to be one of those, let's say, levers that they pull to help them through inflation. I want to ask you, Jim, I'm going to bring it back to Jim here, and then we'll go over to Kevin. What's your take on that? Is that a right move to do, Jim? I'm not sure if that is my end, but what do you think?
Well, I think if you just look at it in terms of apples to apples and say we're just going to serve a poor quality product in order to try to save money, you know, short term, sure, you might save a little bit of money. Long term, that's going to damage the brand. But I do think that there's going to be a lot of, you know, utilization of different cooking techniques and things like that, sous vide and stuff, where you can actually take for example, a lower quality or different quality of something like beef and actually turn it into really, really high quality product at the end of the day. I think that type of stuff is really a valuable way to look at the business right now, for sure.
So a little more switching over from the product quality to more of the technique or different things that are applied to it.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, how long did it take before flank steak started to show up on menus, or, you know, things like short ribs were always viewed as poor quality meat. And, you know, the price of short rib has skyrocketed over the last 10 years because it started to become cool. You know, operators figured out how to turn it into really good product. So there's
Kev, you've come across this before in your career. What's your take on this? Should people be trading down on product quality?
Well,
at a time when value is so important?
Okay, I'm going to play a little game here that's maybe a little different than what you're expecting in this, but I also think it's all about how you ask the question. So if people consider using lower quality ingredients, meaning using what some people would consider that. So the example that came up earlier, and I can't take credit for what one of the chefs mentioned to me, but cabbage will be the savior of 2023, right? So I have a big belief in the fact that to just buy something that's cheaper. So if you were buying like a really good quality steak before, and now you're buying a really, really low quality steak, I don't think that that's necessarily a good choice. But what Jim just said about utilizing other cuts of beef that maybe weren't as attractive in the past, I think is a game changer. And then let me take it one step further, right? So the other aspect of that is we have to stop as a society and collectively jumping on the hot thing all at the same time. Because did we learn nothing from what happened with the supply chain? So you said that you said flank or hanger, right? Well, then all of a sudden everybody buys flank or hanger, and it's a problem. Now it screws up all the other cuts of beef, right? So it's like, how can we have a more broad conversation about, you know, all the different pieces that come from a chicken, and have a broader conversation of all the different things that come from a cow, right? Because, you know, we run through these problems where everybody wants wings, and then what happened? Why are chicken breasts, or chicken thighs such a good price? Because nobody's buying them, right? It's like, why do we all have to do the same thing at the same time, right? So little bit off base there, but I think we have to look a little differently at what that means.
So I want to bring back that question because I think that's a good point. I'll throw this at both of you. Do you trade down quality or you shrink portion size? Which way would you go, Jim?
I mean, that's
a tough one, eh?
I think you're trying to put us in a position where you're going to get us in trouble here, Jay.
No. Well, I met with the restaurateur.
Okay, so I have two ways to answer.
I had a great meeting today with a restaurateur, and we were talking about this stuff. So I asked. So I want to ask this question to you guys. Like, do you take an 8 ounce and go to a 6, right, and keep your same price, or do you go to 8? Maybe a different kind of protein, whatever it is. What's way would you swing?
Let Jim go first. Yeah, go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, you go, Jim.
I think it's more about making sure that whoever's making that decision understands the big impact of that, right? So, you could go the 8 ounce steak to the 7 ounce steak, and you know what? Nobody might really notice. But what I was going to say at the beginning here is, if we're talking to customers that are listening right now, like actual restaurant guests, my recommendation would be that operators should probably look at going from chicken breast to chicken thigh, or from filet to a different cut of beef, and finding ways to make it awesome. If I'm talking to an operator, I'm also going to probably suggest that they consider what things like portion size actually do. But it wouldn't be portion size of the whole dish. It would be portion size of one ingredient in order to make long-term impact.
Now, do you think that is based? I think your demographics, your locations, right? Where you may be downtown in a city where you maybe have white collar guests more and more, and you're not in the rural setting or areas where people consume a lot higher calorie content than versus lower calorie. I mean, we used to do this in restaurants. We used to say, okay, you're downtown. Well, you can get away with a smaller portion because people are not burning that much food during the day while they work. So your portion on your size and your lunch can be a little bit smaller. So I don't know if you ever did that before, Kev. You're kind of looking at me like, what are you talking about?
No. I love how Jim answered that. And I was just, and I don't know if you're going to throw us a comment out there. One of our peers just threw in the chat, noodles make you money. So like back to that comment, if you were going to, force me to give you an answer there, like what Jim said about going from an 8 ounce to a 6 ounce. I mean, the whole idea of potentially shifting your portions. So if you were forced, let's say we're on a cooking show or something like that, it's a contest, you're forced to do that. I would then, some of the things that we've worked on with people is I would beef up maybe some of the other areas of the plate. So like, I like what Pierre says here about noodles, right? So I might change the way that I currently build my plate, because I don't know about you all, but I mean, I've changed as well. I don't need 16 ounces of beef anymore. And I actually, and again, I just want to be careful how I say this, because I still love the idea of it, but I'm understanding. I'm also getting older, so just to be fair, but I know
you're on the couch, Kevin. Come on.
Yeah, no, but exactly. I used to be able to do interviews sitting up, and now I ate too much big pieces of steak. But the idea that you give me more noodles, which are very cost effective, but it's like a really great tasting noodle dish, or you give me more mashed potatoes, which maybe not the best examples because potatoes are a little more expensive, but still the increased cost of that while you reframe the plate. Just if answering that question is necessary, that would be the way that I would look at it, because I still want to give them tremendous value, but I also talk to my customers on social media about what I'm doing, so that I'm not being sneaky. I don't want to just change it I don't want to try and sneak nothing, right? I think it's important that we let them know what we're doing and why.
So I want to bring that up because it's a great point. That a recent article also stated that there is a reduction in beef on a menu and chicken on a menu by 30% now, and moving over to plant-based, right? So more plant-based products or plant-forward, whichever way you want to call it, are moving over that way. Is that a great move too to combat inflation? Would you say, Jim, is introducing more plant-based products, reducing your protein selections?
I mean, not necessarily my area of expertise, but I don't think. I mean, you got to be really aware of what the concept is and the market that you're in, right? I mean, there's no blanket approach to that. There's going to be, in the prairies, they probably want more meat and potatoes. You just got to figure out a way to do it differently. And in Vancouver, plant-based, yeah, sure, it probably works really well. But I think it depends on the market, the concept, the demographic. There's so many variables that go into that.
Kev, you're in the prairies.
Well, I'm just looking for a gold star from one of the chefs I work with here, but I think on that aspect, I think it's, if you're going to do that, and if you're going to go more, and although it falls into the legume category versus like, but I think would still kind of fall into the plant category, then fill me up, give me nutrition, work lentils, chickpeas, things like stuff like that, work that into the, so that I actually feel like I literally, the science of it is sound, right? I feel full, and like after that's done. So yeah, I'm that's what I think, because I as I understand it, that some of these alternative items are not necessarily cheaper, at least not at the moment. And so I look at as plant forward as other ingredients, not to get back to cabbage again, but we really do get filled up naturally by legumes, right? Pulses and that. So I just think I think we got to start looking at that a little bit more as well. Give that a little bit of consideration.
Flexitarian movement.
I love it.
He knows I created a burger once.
Yeah, I love it. Yep.
You know what? You do all these great things, and you create one burger that doesn't really become a big hit, and that's all you're remembered by. So before we get into the calculator, I want to talk a little bit about this mix of cost adjustments that I read about also just recently, about doing these activities and coming towards food inflation as a blended approach. Jim, is this something you mentioned the other day? There's other options out there before you hit the menu that you can adjust to make some tweaks in your P&L that's going to be effective. What are some of those things that you may suggest out there people look at right now?
Outside of what's happening with just pricing on menus. I mean, there's so many, right? I mean, not to talk too much about what we do, but I mean, we look at things like how productive is the overall business, right? In order to try to find incremental improvements that will help to negate some of those rising costs without raising prices. Mm-hmm. We look at things like how hard does your team have to work? So measuring things like employee workload. How hard does your team have to work in order to get the result that you're looking to get and prevent burnout, which, I mean, turnover is the other major issue in this labor shortage, right? So if you can prevent your team from being burnt out and then they don't resign and go work somewhere else, you're going to save money. I was reading a stat the other day. I think this is more US related than Canada specific, but 50% of employees applying for jobs or accepting jobs in quick service restaurants resign within 90 days in 2022.
Really?
50% of new hires in QSR.
Jim, what's it cost right now to flip an employee?
Depends kind of where you look, but I'm seeing anywhere between $2,000 and $3,000 an employee.
Really? Wow. That adds up.
Oh yeah. So
that's a big thing.
That's again talking about that compartmentalization thing. I think it's, in order to really do a good job of battling inflation, we have to look at menu, we have to look at product offering, we have to look at business operation, we have to look at turnover, we have to look at, a lot of these different areas that really, I mean, at the end of the day, our industry has kind of neglected some of those for a really long time.
Yeah, I know. I was just mentioning the other day, and this is maybe not on the costing tools, but I think it comes back to the value that you offer was, you don't really hear so much about mystery shoppers right now. When those people doing those activities where the value needs to be revisited from a consumer base of what you offer. And I don't really hear a lot of people doing those right now. And it may be what you want to be looking at, because I think there's some opportunities to look at what that value is that the consumer's getting.
Yeah. So a couple things there, because I want to add to what Jim was saying. I don't think he talked enough actually about his business and his services, but 7 most dangerous words in the business and mostly in foods in the restaurant industry, but we've always done things that way. And I just think that to what Jim said about looking into things, I just implore people, be open. I don't know what it is. I will say this. I think we all struggle with pride and all that, but be open to looking at different things when people come to you versus, we don't have a problem there, or I don't know what it is. Maybe it's we're worried that we've been doing things wrong or whatever. Who cares? If it means, getting things turned around, and at the end of the day, you as a owner, putting more money in your pocket, ask. We had a very, very successful customer a couple of weeks ago. One of our new chefs went out to visit him, and he doing a lot of things right. And he sits down, he looks across the table from him, and he's like, "All right, tell me what do you think I should look at?" He just jumped right to it, versus being like, "Oh yeah, no, we do that. We don't have a problem there. We don't." Fine, don't call them problems. I don't care what you call them, but be open to like looking at like as expertise. Like you got Jim out here with like years of experience and a company that does all these things. Like, what do you have to, and I'm trying to not get too emotional, but like, what do you have to lose, right? Because theoretically you're losing right now if you're in a backwards position, right? So get carried away there.
You're right, Kevin. And I think the other thing that came up in this discussion today with this other restaurateur out in Toronto, we talked for a long time, was I think it's time to do some restaurant audits, right? Like to look at everything. It's time to audit your menu, time your waste, your practice. I was talking to someone the other day about, are you weighing your produce again? Are you weighing your proteins? Are you looking at the cooked versus raw factors on your proteins again? All these things that we kind of forgotten over the years that we're not practicing more as much, or maybe we've kind of just delayed it because of COVID and different things out there. But I think there's some opportunities to look at that stuff again. Well, Jim, do you see people doing those anymore?
Well, I think it's
gonna be rare.
Yeah, there's a lot of, like Kevin was saying, right? There's just looking through a new lens, I think, is just really the message, right? And we spend so much time talking to people about, I'm not trying to force one thing on anybody. I'm not trying to convince the world that they have to do one thing a certain way. That's not what it's about. But what we're trying to do is change the way that the industry thinks about certain things. And right now, over the last few years, sure, inflation maybe went up in one area one year, or, you had a wage spike in 2015 kind of thing in Canada. And, that rocked the boat a little bit. But right now you've got customer spend is starting to trend down because of inflation. You've got cost of goods, which is up because of inflation. You've got rent, which is starting to climb. You've got customer visits, which are down. You've got literally every single different variable is almost working against a lot of restaurants right now. So if they don't just say, okay, I'm ready to start looking at things differently, they're going to have a tough go because the entire business model has changed. Yeah,
it really has. Cool. So thank you, Jim, for that, because I think that's a perfect way to go into our segment of this calculator that we're going into. Kevin's so excited to throw numbers. I love when Jim throws numbers. So he looks at it differently. So we're going to do that, but we're going to run this quick commercial, and then we're going to come back and break out this calculator and have some fun. Jim, you saved how much? We're going to save tons of money, I think, for people out there looking at this soon. So hold tight. We'll be right back.
Sysco Classic High Performance Nitrile Gloves. Sysco Classic High Performance Nitrile Gloves are great for back of the house tasks such as chopping and slicing, working around moderate heat, or customer facing operations. They offer an elegant look and superior protection for any culinary application where touch dexterity, cut protection, and presentation are key. Sysco Classic High Performance Nitrile Gloves have superb tensile strength plus a flexible form-fitting design. They are an ideal barrier protection when working around moderate heat, oil, and chemicals. They can be used for cleaning and sanitizing in the front or back of the house. They're available in black and cobalt blue for any HACCP programs. They are great for detail-oriented tasks and are compliant with all FDA regulations for safe food contact. Nitrile gloves offer the right protection for the wearer when performing precision tasks that require long wear and a fitted grip. Sysco Classic High Performance Nitrile Gloves are available for order today. See your local Sysco representative for more information.
There you go. Nothing is better than the glove commercial. Right, Kev?
Yes.
This is like, well, now we got to roll up the sleeves, slap some nitrile gloves on, and get into this program here. Jim's laughed, and I'll tell you one day about the glove story.
Yep, on a different show and platform. That's
different show, late night.
Yep.
Late night.
Yeah.
All righty. So, Kev, can you introduce us to this tool here? Because you use it a lot. Well, and I think it actually was born out of Winnipeg. So
I just appreciate Jim not laughing or anything like that, because this is literally the most basic way that you could look at things, right? But we called it the inflation calculator, and I personally feel like it was almost a remix of all these things that we've been doing over the years, and now Jay, we just launched that inflation life raft, and there's there's got to be 15 or 20 different calculators in there, because like Jim said, compartmentalizing, right? I really hope that anybody that sees this, that figures they've got this under control, doesn't think, oh, well, there's a whole slew of other areas that we have calculators, or Jim has calculators and tools, right? But it was so interesting to, you got to, I mean, at least the way that I've been coached or taught over my life is you have to break down overall challenges into bite-sized manageable pieces, right? And I feel like this was such a great exercise in getting people focused on what actually needed to be done. And as always, we also found out through the process, we had a bunch of customers that didn't know what their average guest check was. And again, I realized there's either insecurity in that or whatever right away. It's like, that's okay. But we want you to know, and we want to teach you, and we want you to understand why, right? But I think it was really a great idea right when things were really spiraling at the beginning of all this to just put some of these basic numbers in. And again, this is not a perfect scientific formula by any means, but it gives you a broad overlying sort of where you need to be, right? And then you can start looking inwards.
Yeah.
I hope that was a
yeah, great.
All right, well, let's get into it. Jim, you ready to rock our world on this? Because you did last time. Let's do it.
Sure.
Let's do it again.
Sure.
All right, so what's an average monthly sales? Let's just go with a restaurant in Winnipeg.
50.
Okay.
I think there's a lot. I don't know about Jim. Maybe might be a little bit different. But I mean, you deal with customers from all over. There's a lot that are in that 500,000, 600,000.
Yeah, $500,000 to $1 million. There's a lot of restaurants in that.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure.
So average guest check. What are we at now, Jim? You mentioned it went down a little bit. What are we at?
Well, there's one, and this is interesting, talking about what the year looked like versus what the last quarter looked like. So, I mean, a restaurant that does $1 million that we're dealing with, but not far off from this, their year-long average was $43, but their Q4 average was $39.
So let's go 39.
Which is a big difference. I mean, $4 for every customer they serve, right? I mean, that's substantial.
Well, look at the difference. We can do the difference here. So you said how much you say? 45?
43.
Adds up.
Now that's with the food. That's with the 40% food cost. If you leave that.
Now, what's the food cost going right now in Canada? Would you say, Jim? Because I've heard some crazy numbers.
Yeah, it totally depends. I mean, I was talking to a restaurant operator the other day that was operating, independent, a couple locations, not huge volume, and they were, in the 32% range. There's some that are lower than that. This concept that I just mentioned that went from $43 to $39. I mean, they're running like over 40% food cost.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, Jim, we have a customer that's like, I don't know. I want to say, I hope I don't butcher this number, but like, let's say 60% of their sales is beef. They are in a much different place than a customer that sells noodle bowls, right? Like,
sure. Yeah, it totally depends. But, I mean, you can leave that at 40.
Yep.
Okay. I was going to say, let's play safe.
Well, and I think one thing we've been learning over the last little while, and I think it is overwhelming, right, is that the people say they know their food costs, and then we ask them if they count inventory, and they're like, not that often.
Yeah, once a month.
They don't do waste management. You're like, okay, well, I don't want to tell you don't know your food cost, but you theoretically, food cost has a formula to it, and all of those things are included, right? But so that's why I like Jim putting it that way, because I think somebody that maybe hasn't been able to adjust with the times has had a lot of turnover in staff, which now you're taking that in, right? Like although that is labor cost, but that could be affecting your food cost because of the waste and all the other stuff. I think 40 might actually be a pretty sound, not that it's a great number, but that might be a pretty representative number right now.
And in my experience, those operators that say, I know my food cost, but don't understand the formula of how to work through that or don't do inventory. Usually what they mean by that is that they know how much they spend on food.
Yep, and they know what their sales are.
Right.
Yep.
Now, Jim, what is the average you find that someone that maybe does their inventory once every couple months versus someone that does it every week or every day? Is there a difference in percentages usually?
Yeah, and that's hard to compare, right? Because although we see lots of different restaurants that, like you just described, one might do inventory every week, one might do it every month, one might never do it. What we don't see often, or what we don't have the information, at the tip of my tongue on, is what the difference is from when one restaurant went from never doing it to once a month to once a week, right? On that comparable. So it's tough to say. There's definitely probably a difference though.
Yeah, I think I was doing around between 5 and 8% difference, right? Just because there's variables galore, but was about 5 to 8. I think on average. So, let's inflation. What's that big number, Jim? You want to be the big number guy?
Well, the last stat that I saw was 2022 ended at 8.9%.
8.9. Kev, you got any updates on that?
I've been hearing, I thought 8.8 or what? Yeah, that's what I heard as well.
That's food specific.
No, yes, correct. And that's blended, right? So like there are some that are way more and some that actually stabilized a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's look at these numbers, Kev. Do you want to kind of walk us through this, what this is telling us now?
I'd actually prefer Jim to do it, to be honest with
Okay,
you.
just so Jim, you do it, Jim.
Just so I don't screw it up. Like,
he wants to lay back on that couch. He wants to have a nap.
This is your work. I mean, it's
sit
not
back, Kev. Jim, go ahead.
Yeah.
It's not your calculator, it's mine, but you do it.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's a couple different ways. Again, speaking of different lenses to look through, there's a couple different ways to look at this, right? I mean, what this is telling us is that the current cost of purchasing or of that food at $20,000, now that same product costs this business almost $22,000, right? And their food cost percentage went from 40 to 43.5. So, I mean, there's so many different ways that people need to consider what this information is telling them, right? If we just think about food cost percentage, it's jumped 3.5%, and that's scary, right? If we think about it in dollars, well, their spend just went up $1,780. And for a business that's doing $600,000 a year, that cost every month, that's substantial. That's a lot of money, right? You know, I think the other part that we haven't talked about yet that's important for operators to understand is the contribution side of it, right? Is what actually goes to the bank. And that's where, you know, there's certain, Jay, I think you and I talked about this last time we were looking at this tool, and inflation is scary and dollars going up is scary and percentage going up is scary. But what's really the most important part is what's going to the bank at the end of the month or at the end of the week or the end of the day. And so this is actually telling us that they were at $17.20 for, you know, per, and now they're at $18.73. So it's actually a big difference. It's $1.50 less for every time.
So Jim, so what you're saying there is that inflation is also driving up the amount of money I'm bringing to the bank, or is that decreasing?
Decreasing.
Wow, that's not fun.
So one way that we would encourage operators.
So for every check, they're losing $1.53 to the bank.
On average. So what kind of thing, this inflation thing, you know, there's some items that are seeing higher inflation than others, right? And there's some items that are seeing a lot lower inflation. But, you know, what I always say to operators is that I would rather sell a whole bunch of an item that I make $10 every time than a whole bunch of an item that I make $3 every time. And high food cost on an item that you make $10 is not as scary or dangerous as high food cost on an item you make $3. So there's that component to it too, right? Is actually looking at, you know, if we're going to get really detailed on this, we would almost need to do this with every single item on the menu and get a really good idea of what items are still making money and what items aren't.
So Jim, can we do that? Can we play with this? And let's do a steak.
Sure.
So we talked about that earlier. And then we'll do Kevin's favorite, chicken parm.
So let's say they sell 50 steaks a month.
Okay, so let's go up here. So you like that, Kev?
Average monthly.
I used to order the steak, like when I was a server, I used to order the steak because my staff meal, I'd get 50%, and then the company discontinued it because it was literally losing them money. So like I switched to chicken parm. So it's actually, there's a lot of meaning to that story for me.
There's a few stories here now. Chicken parm and
Story, carry on, Jim.
All right, for everyone out there that's suffering with food inflation, always have a laugh or two.
Yeah.
Okay, so monthly average sales?
Okay, so let's say 50.
50? Okay.
Just 50.
So let me go into my fancy calculator here. Okay.
And let's say the average check is, let's just say it's a $40 steak.
Okay. That work?
I'm not sure if it did or not. Average guest check a month.
You have to change the food cost too. Like if it's steak plates, the food cost is higher. I don't know.
Yeah, so the food cost is probably 45% on a $40 steak.
Yeah, like at best right now the cost.
Inflation on protein?
If you're using sirloin, maybe, right?
No, inflation on protein has got to be higher than 9.
Oh, way
That's
higher.
probably
I mean,
12.
Jim, 20. I've even heard upwards of 20,
Upwards of
like
20?
on average. Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
It depends on which beef cuts you're using, but like you were saying earlier, tenderloin, ribeye, just through the it's very high.
yeah. So Jay, what this is telling us now is that when you used to make, right, you're charging $40 for that dish. You used to make $22 before you paid for the labor and all the other line items on your P&L. You used to make $22. Now you make $18.40.
By doing nothing.
Sell one, you're making $3.60 less, but you're still making $18.40 on this, right? Okay, so now let's do a chicken dish.
Kevin's chicken parm. Okay, how much did we make on this one? What was this one, Jim? 18 what?
$18.40 every time we sell one.
Okay. Sounds good so far, Kev.
Okay, so let's do the chicken dish now. And let's say it's a chicken appetizer of some sort. Let's say you sell 100 of them a month.
Okay.
And the average check on that item is probably only, $17 or $18 now.
Okay.
Okay. And the food cost on that item, I don't know, what's the food cost running on chicken now, Kevin? 25% maybe? 28?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I would say I would just use 30 to be round, but
okay.
Yeah. Inflation is still really high on chicken just because of the whole avian demand, but also then the avian situation.
Right. So what this is telling us now basically is you used to make $12 on that dish-ish, right? Give or take. And now you make 11, basically, give or take a few cents. So, the important thing for operators to consider is that this is a lower food cost percentage item, but every time you sell one, you make less than the 45% food cost item. Every time you sell one, you make more, even with a 20% inflation rate.
Wow.
So
ideally,
to answer your question about should we shift more to different products on the menu, that's why I would say you have to consider things like demographic, market, all of those types of things. Because if you take a restaurant that does really, generates really good sales on steaks, you worry about inflation and food costs, so you switch to chicken because you think that that's going to benefit the business long term. If your customers still want steaks, they're probably going to go somewhere else.
Yeah.
Right.
And I would assume more and more people will want a steak cooked at a restaurant than at home nowadays. If you're going out, right? The demand and value there. And not everyone's got a barbecue by their couch, Kev. Chicken parm, boy.
Yeah, so this process, Jay, we encourage people to go through this on every item on their menu.
Every item on the menu. Break it down. And then you get into tools. And we won't get into this too often, but
Kevin, did I sum that up properly?
You did incredible.
This where you go through the ingredients, right? Item by item. You need to break this down. Jim, do you see a lot of restaurants that do this often, or is it just usually a few?
Not enough, for sure.
Not enough.
Jay, when we did a series on this years back, and with independent restaurants, and like 10%, I would say, on or a little higher, like would actually had all of their recipes costed out and could like put them in front of us, even just a spreadsheet, maybe not using a system like Optimum Control or something like that, but it was a very low percentage of them. And we've been trying to help folks because it's overwhelming, right? If you've never done it before, it certainly feels daunting and overwhelming. But once you do it, it changes your perspective of everything.
Completely.
Yeah, it really does.
Yeah,
it really does. And it does take time. It does take time. I remember taking a day and a half to do one restaurant's menu that wasn't that big, but it's like you said, Kevin. You kind of find out a lot of secrets, maybe, or surprises to really look at things to cut your cost before you have to get into a menu price increase. Now, Jim, one question I want to have here to finish off today's show is that we see a lot. We hear this. I even read it in the articles I read in Connected. Is it a good move to do a blanket bump on your menu of $1 to $2 in all items?
No.
Can you repeat that so everyone watching this does not,
Kevin's face.
not hear that?
I thought Jim, you heard Jim in all caps, but the only thing I could add to that is all caps.
Yeah.
All caps. All caps, Jim. Can you say it again?
Yeah, no, that's not a good approach. No.
Okay. So everyone that's watching this, that you've read those articles, that people are like, well, they're going to have to bump everything $1 to $2 and everything else. Jim is saying not to do this, and so are we.
Yeah.
Is making sure don't do this. It's not a good. Why is it not good, Jim? Why is that not good?
And this is where some of this process gets important. And I would say there's two things. There's another piece to that I would say don't do. So don't do the blanket $1 or $2 approach. Also, don't do the blanket 10% increase. Right? Because there are thresholds on pricing on different items. There are, like we just talked about, contribution wise, figuring out where and when you can actually make money depending on the menu. Because there are some items that you might be able to increase by 10 or 15 or 20% even, without your customer really having, that threshold issue. There are some items that 2% is either enough or will actually get you to that threshold where customers are, going to be turned off to the price. I don't know, Kevin, what do you think on that?
That is, you're 100% bang on. But I do believe that the reason some people do the overall is because they don't have all of those things costed out. And so they don't have an understanding for that. And it just feels, and I'm not trying to let them off the hook, but it's like, it just feels like too much. It just feels overwhelming. Right. But yeah, we didn't actually, like 3 or 4 years ago, we actually didn't see as many problems with it as we do now with the amount that everybody has gone through. But we've actually seen a few customers recently that they've actually gotten to a point where they've almost priced themselves out against their competition.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So,
Jim, have you heard about the market price menus that some locations in the States are playing around with?
I'm not sure. Probably. I just don't know if I know it as that term.
Is it a different term? But it's where the menu prices on everything on their menu adjust.
Oh, dynamic pricing. Yeah, I refer to that as dynamic pricing. But the whole stock market board pricing as you go. Yeah, I think it's, it may not be industry wide, something that gets to be something we see all the time, anytime soon, maybe for years. But I think I do believe that the restaurant industry needs to look at how other industries take advantage of that, right? Things like pay more for
airlines, like the planes do it all the time.
Oh gosh,
well, travel.
So do the car carriers, the third party surge pricing, right?
Surge pricing, and also things like one thing that I expect to start coming in, especially in the big markets, Vancouver, Toronto, New York, and Los Angeles, and some of the bigger cities in the U.S. is the concept that you pay more to have the best seat in the house. Mm-hmm. That side of things, right?
That in Calgary, but
you pay more to sit at the glass than you do in the nosebleeds. You want to see a concert on the front row, you're going to pay more. There's a barber down the street from where we live that charges $1 for every appointment that you book. You can walk in for free and wait, or you can pay $1 and not wait.
What?
And I asked him straight up, I said, do you ever get complaints about this? He goes, no. Who's upset about paying $1 to not have to wait? So that type of stuff is
it adds up, right?
Absolutely.
And I also just
I know I've heard of that in Calgary. Some patios, you charge more to sit on a patio, right?
Well, and Jay, just back to what you're saying there, I think it depends on your business style. Like that wouldn't necessarily work for everybody. Mm-hmm. But back to the market pricing thing, the example that we came across in our market was a place that sells tons of beef, like a beef house. Seafood has had a little, like some fluctuations too, but I don't know if it's been to the level of beef. But just that idea of people are at the grocery store every day, they're seeing it fluctuate. So it's not that hard to wrap, but that was like less than 5% of their, like with that heavy of a menu, that might be 5 or 10% of the restaurants, right? So it's not like it just wouldn't work for most.
Well, it's interesting, Jay, because that concept has existed in restaurants for a very long time, but only things like lobster tail.
Yeah.
Do you remember market price?
Lots of places still do. Yeah.
So ribeye could be market price. Certain in-season things can be market price. I mean, that's it. I think it's coming for sure.
Yeah. So I think the other thing is that we have menus today that we can adjust on the fly. We don't have the print menu. Some places still do. And
QR codes. Like I'd say, I was surprised actually how many have done it. Yep.
Yeah. There's a lot of things you can do. I think the protein needs to look at market price fluctuations on proteins on your steaks and stuff. And I think people would understand that. I think it's something to really consider. Or running, some LTOs that you can adjust the prices on on your LTO menu or feature menu and things like that. That can adjust. I kind of like that, the protein one. Maybe not on the chicken parm, but on the proteins, you can do a fluctuation of a market price. It might actually be a pretty good idea to do that, because then there might be opportunities when the price comes down. We all hope that happens soon. As it comes down, that your prices will come down. You can start marketing that as well out into your marketplace. Or I think also consumers probably like the fact that you're being quite transparent in what you're doing as well. You're not hiding anything. You're sharing what's happening, right?
Absolutely.
So anyways, we're going to wrap up today's show. So thanks again, Jim, and Couch Boy. For today's show is Kevin. You got to do all the shows now on your couch coming up.
No, I don't.
Yeah, I almost feel like
I refuse to flip the screen right now so you can see the chaos around me. But
I want to just a couple things, just wrap it up today, because Kev, we always do this. 2 things to take away for operators that are watching the show, they're going to watch this whole thing later on demand. 2 things they can take away from today's show that you took away that we need to get restaurants to maybe try or test or learn a little bit about.
Well, for me, the most critical and most important thing right now, actually, I think it could go to any part of our lives, but be open. I'm not going to try and tell you what you should do, but just be more open to looking at different parts of your business and hearing what other people have to say and trying it. Like I don't know what you have to lose, but you theoretically you have everything to gain from it, right? And then the other one is accept help. I think we helped a couple customers last month, literally food costs, like spreadsheet, top to bottom. It was, I can't remember what the one customer was, 25 items or whatever. Right. So accept the help. Do not be embarrassed. Do not be like I know those are emotions you might feel, but try to get over that and just be like, cool, this is great. They're willing to help. So.
Love that, Kevin. Jim?
Well, I mean, Kevin, you and I need to do this more often because we're on the same page. I was going to say, just, accept the fact that the model has changed, right? And so if your business doesn't change along with it, it's just going to be more difficult. And, whether it's companies like Benchmark 60 or Sysco or Kevin specifically, or, there's lots of other people out there. I think there are resources that are, available specifically to help make this easier, right? So, accept some help and, 2023.
Well, thank you so much, Jim. Here's my 2 bits, because I always throw my 2 bits. I think there's a couple things. I think one, to both your points, is you can't move forward in this industry for sustainability or to be around for the next 5 years unless you don't start tackling your costs and knowing your cost. It's just everything that's out there now. It's too hard and too difficult just to go and not know your cost. Because I remember in the days I was talking to restaurants way back, like Kevin probably remembers this, way back about doing inventory or breaking costs down, and people were like, no. It was like once in a blue moon you get someone to do it. And today it's becoming the norm. Oh, Kev fell asleep. So there's that. I want to make sure everyone takes away. Know your cost, do it. You can't. It's going to be very difficult for you to make a lot of profit as you move forward. And the last is, and this is something that may be outside the norm, is there's so many group chats out there on Facebook. I know a lot of people may not use Facebook or other things out there, or TikTok. Go over to TikTok and join some of these groups that are out there and share some ideas and tips on what they're doing to combat food inflation. Or call Jim at Benchmark 60 and he'll help you out. So anyways, I think Kevin fell asleep on the couch. We lost him. He had the weirdest internet today. So anyways, thanks so much, Jim. To everyone else, we're back again tomorrow. Thanks for enjoying our show today and watch on demand on all social platforms. I just say just Google us because it's easier than naming all of them. We're out there, and we have a great show again tomorrow, fighting food inflation. Here's Kevin. He's like, Kevin, did you fall asleep and hit the off button?
You just can't make this stuff up, man. He was going through the electrical panel and trying to find the right breaker to turn off in an old box that he was pulling wires out of, and boop, everything just.
Well, this is the best thing about our live shows, is that These things happen. So anyways, to everyone else that's watched our show today or later, that's Kevin. We'll be back later with Kevin's home DIY show. So
Thanks,
anyway, thanks so much,
guys.
Kevin. Thanks everyone else. Have a great evening and get out there and support our industry. Cheers.